Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
It's Sunday, the 4th of March, 2018, and we're all surrounded and covered in snow and probably fed up looking out the window at all this snow. People being trapped and everything else. Oh, it's just total chaos over here in Ireland with this snow. Unprecedented, they said. True, the last time we had something like this was around 1982, but I think this has definitely topped it. What do you think, Steve?
Definitely, yeah. I remember 82 as well. I think I was in school at the time, secondary school, and yeah, I do remember it. And it was pretty bad, but yeah, I think what we've had over the past 5 days, it was actually from Wednesday, yeah, it definitely topped it.
Definitely topped it.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so on the show tonight, we have two guests on the show tonight. We have a chap called David Gallup, Esquire, President and General Counsel, World Service Authority. We're going to be talking about world passports with David, and that's in a few minutes. And we're also going to have Trevor Eivers on. As you know, the Open Mind Conference was supposed to be on yesterday, but due to the severe weather conditions, it had to be postponed and moved back. Probably a few weeks, and we're going to be talking to Trevor later on to find out what the situation was and everything else. And I think he made a good call on it because the weather was atrocious. It was really, really bad. Nobody could move, so there's no point having it there. So we'll talk to Trevor later. But before we crack on with a few news stories, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Okay, communication channels this evening, folks.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thank you, Mary. Speaking of the OYM chat room, that can be found on our website, which is oymradio.com. You will see the link there for the chat room, and if you have registered and have a username and password, you can log into the chat room. A big hi to everyone who's already logged in there, and that is the place. Well, that is one place to ask questions this evening for our guests. We also have on the website there the usual links to the anti-social media, Facebook, Twitter, Skype, YouTube for the podcasts, and we also have the link there for the email address, which is info@oymradio.com. And if you fancy it, drop us an email just to let us know where you're listening to us from and what the weather is like there. And you can send us pictures and all if you like. It's entirely up to yourself. We also have on the website there links for TuneIn Radio Link application. That's a free app for your smartphone or your iPhone or your PC or your laptop or whatever you want to put it, and you can listen to us all day, every day. We also have the links there for the podcast. Also, there's a podcast ranging back to 2015 for anyone who missed the show. You can catch up there. We also have the OYM shop. There's a link there as well with a few bits and bobs in there if you fancy supporting us that way. There's a couple of CDs left, and we also have some bumper stickers for your bumper or your car, just to let people know that you are wide awake and listening to OYM Radio.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, now we received information during the week. I'm sure you've all seen it, most of you have seen it, about the actual eviction in Balbriggan, which was really bad news, really. Just on Tuesday, I believe it was, Monday or Tuesday, when it was going to happen. And this is the information that we were given. Steve is going to do a read through it and give you an update.
Right, just before I do that, I want to mention as well, People's Internet Radio. Actually, for the first time in ever, I forgot to mention People's Internet Radio as well. Great bunch of people over there, and the chat room also on peoplesinternetradio.com. A big hi to everyone, and we monitor that for questions. Anyway, it says on the article today, Monday the 26th, in Balbriggan, a family have been forcibly evicted. The man was knocked out cold, apparently, by the KBC Bank thugs. He woke up with his clothes cut in half as firemen roused him on the ground. 5 times the thugs assaulted him in total as he stood on the porch of his dwelling, which is supposed to be inviolable under the Constitution. The so-called peace officers were there twice and they left. The man and his wife were outside since 9 a.m. or thereabouts. It's about to start snowing. It was about to snow at this particular time. The family were distraught as they have nowhere else to call home. They will surely die if they were left out in the bitter snow tonight. I am worried sick, it says, for them. I have known them for 6 years. I am at my wit's end. I can only imagine how they must be feeling. If all bets are off, and it's starting to look like that, folks, it seems banks and their balaclava-wearing thugs, there were 5 or 6 of them, it seems, from an external jurisdiction, and they can drag you from your dwelling and knock you out cold in the process, leave you to die on the side of the road, and all they care about is, and then they have the audacity to advertise themselves as the bank of you. It begs the question, just who the hell do they think they are? They think you are a piece of dog poo. 15 inches of snow due to fall, it says. The man and his wife, whom were wearing their pyjamas at the time, have been thrown onto the street in our name. In your name, in my name. Are you okay with that? And for what? Some bits of paper. We now allow banks to commit attempted murder. So never mind the 8th Amendment. Just bring your pregnant ass to KBC, it says. And maybe their thugs will kill you and your child. Wow! That's a kind of a strange article there. But we did actually hear yet that in the end, I think they left, the thugs left, and the man actually, he was able to walk back into the house.
Yeah, well, that comment there, commentary was from Vin. Cheers, Vin, for that, from PIR Radio. Vin was down there because he lives down in that neck of the woods, and he was doing some filming. And obviously Ben did some filming as well. And apparently KBC now, bank are apparently going after Ben. They have a case in the High Court coming up. They're going after Ben. What did Ben do?
What did he do? But poor Ben, he seems to be responsible for everything that goes on in this country.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Blame Ben. So that was very, very nasty on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday but they're back in the house as far as I know. It's just, where do we draw the line with this? Where do we draw the line with the banks doing this and the politicians and the Gardaí just standing by and watching it and not getting involved? There's something wrong with society when that happens. Really is. And, the late 1800s, Michael Davitt was doing the same thing. And this is 100 plus years later, and the same thing's happening. Have we not learned from history? Obviously not. It's a bit of a worry. Anyway, further afield, there is another concern as well. And this is on 24thcenturywire.com. Many websites that have the same information, by the way, not just that. I don't know whether people heard, but South Africa votes to confiscate white minorities' land without compensation. The South African Parliament voted on Tuesday to move forward in amending their constitution to allow for the confiscation of land from their white minority without compensation. The move has come just 24 years after apartheid officially ended. Whites ended the apartheid system only with the explicit constitutional guarantee that the land would never be stolen. But now that they've become a small minority with rapidly dwindling political power, that's all gone out the window. On the Facebook page there was a group on there, and the group is called Independent Thinkers of South Africa, and it said, somebody posted on it, separation is the only solution. We give white people 24 hours to leave our country of Africa. Failing to comply with this request, we will kill them, their children and their women. We will kill them all. Now, I was fortunate enough to, on a business trip, to go down to South Africa, Johannesburg, for a week. I was doing some techie stuff down there, and it was a fantastic place. I have to say, fantastic place. I was really welcomed by everybody. The thing was, the kind of underlying thing that was kind of made clear to me, that life isn't worth anything, and basically, they will shoot you as quick as anything if you don't do what you're told. And at the time, there was an awful lot of whites being attacked. Now, it wasn't kind of houses being burnt or anything like that. Basically, they would go in, the white people would be attacked, beaten up, raped and all that kind of stuff, and then left. And that was going on at the time, and that was like that was the late 90s when I was there. And great people, and just everything was great, but the undercurrent was that life wasn't worth much. And if this is going on now in South Africa, that's a bit of a worry for the white farmers on what's going on. It's again the divide and conquer. We're all human beings. I don't know why this goes on, but something needs to be done anyway. But so I hope things get sorted there in the end. How's your week anyway, Steve?
How's my week? We've been snowed in, Alan.
Yes.
There you go. That's
How's your house? How's your house for the week?
I have to say, and we did manage to get out. Myself and my wife did get out walking. You wouldn't call it walking, trudging through the snow on a one-horse open sleigh, I suppose.
It's the cabin fever, isn't it? The cabin fever was setting in.
Well, I have to say, one of the neighbours actually that we met at the shop, the local shop, where there was no bread. I suppose it's the same story everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the neighbours said, I suppose you just have cabin fever. And I have to say, no. I definitely didn't. Because obviously I'm generally working during the day, so I'm only kind of home in the evening time. But I have to say, I enjoyed spending time with the family. We didn't actually have any power cuts. There were a lot of power cuts across the country. We didn't actually have any power cuts, but I did enjoy spending time with the family. We had some provisions in. We knew it was coming. So we made sure we had the extra loaf of bread. We had some fuel in as well. So we were okay for a couple of days. Now, if I had went on for another week, that would have been a different story. So we were kind of lucky in that respect. But no, definitely not cabin fever. And I have to say, a lot of the neighbours were out as well. Kind of, when the snow kind of came and it was there for a day or two, and then people kind of, some people needed to get out and needed to get provisions, so some of the neighbours actually did go out and start clearing the roadway and footpaths as well. And as I mentioned to you, I was kind of embarrassed because I didn't have a shovel. My shovel was in work. They do say if you don't forget your shovel if you want to go to work, so that's where mine was. And I have to say it was not the ideal place, so I was kind of embarrassed that I couldn't go out and help, but we managed to get out today because the road was clear, so we tipped into a local shop and we picked up a snow shovel. So as soon as we went home after the evening meal, we started kind of shoveling the snow and taking turns with the one shovel, and one of the neighbours came out, I have to say, next door, across the road, and he came out and he just started helping, and my lad was there as well, and there was an extra shovel, so it was a great community spirit, I have to say. Nobody was kind of left to rot in their abode, so to speak, because I think everyone was kind of checking on elderly relatives and all, neighbours and stuff, and like you'd see the footage on the news and you'd kind of seen how bad it was. But as bad and all as it was, and the great community spirit that I'm sure was in every small town and village, and probably large ones as well across the country, there was an incident that I think it kind of sickened a lot of people. I'm guessing you've heard of it as well, up in Tala, a place in Dublin, just outside of Dublin called Tala, where some thieves robbed a JCB and broke into a local Lidl or Lidl or Lidl, however you pronounce it. I say tomato, you say tomato, or whatever. But a Lidl store was actually broken into. They robbed a safe. I think they attacked members of the Gardaí, and not only did they rob the safe, but they actually, with the JCB, they pulled the whole roof down, so the shop basically imploded on itself. And like there was no need for that. There's people out of work now.
These men were supposed to be in the 30s and 40s. It's not as if, you expect kind of kids or teenagers, but these were 30 or 40.
You would expect, if you hear something like that, you would kind of expect like people of a certain age, but these were mature men. They weren't young fellas. But they've done that anyway. I think the Gardaí have got, was it 8 of them? I think there was 8 in custody at the moment, or were arrested. I mean, people couldn't get out, and to go and do that. So I mean, people in that local area now, the shop is gone. So, where are they going to get their bits and pieces? Anyway, that's it. So I mean, it's just coping with it, and probably the same as yourself and everyone else across the country, everyone who's listening. In fact, if anyone who's listening, who's maybe on either of the chat rooms, if you have a story, a funny story or an anecdote, just drop it in there. I'm sure we'd love to read it out maybe later on. How was your week?
Yeah, okay. Well, before we bring David on, just an update on a couple of things. Now, obviously, we've had severe weather over here in Ireland. And on Walton's Mountain, we got a bashing here because we are up high. And so we're more open to the elements, and that always happens. But the lady who does our voiceover, Steph, it's really annoying. She actually is stuck at the moment in her house with her 3 kids. And she can't get out because the snow drifts, because there's kind of a road or a path up to where her house is, and there's a snow drift and you can't drive. And her local neighbour is a farmer. Did he do anything? Not at all. So basically, we contacted the civil defence over here in Ireland because the civil defence are going around and checking everybody. And apparently the civil defence said they don't have any 4x4s or diggers. All they have is a minibus.
How?
So minibus.
Oh, okay.
So you jump on the minibus and have a sing song, but that we can't get to you because there's a snowdrift in the way, you know.
Sing a few verses that come by.
Yeah. So for people who are thinking that the civil defence will be able to help you when there's a major catastrophe, think again. They won't. You're on your own. All right. Basically the civil defence told Steph that there's nothing that they can do, and the local farmer wouldn't do anything either. Even if he could, he wouldn't. So this is a good way to find out who the community-based people are and the ones who are I'm okay Jacks. So next year, if the weather is pretty bad, and it's predicted to be very bad, basically I think you need to make sure that you're fully stocked and you're fully efficient and don't rely on people. Now there was a few people where I am who came out and we all helped to clear the roads so cars could drive, but out of 52 houses there's only a handful of people. Now there is a thing, that I thought, surely we can have a device that we can put on our car, or a device that we can use to do our own snow ploughing, and because necessity is the mother of all invention. But there is a thing on the internet, and we put it up on the Facebook page, and if you Google it, it's called a Nordic V-plough. And the Nordic V-plough attaches to the front of your car, and your car becomes a plough. Which is brilliant. Now it's about $600 or $700, but if you want to see it, it's ingenious, it's brilliant. And that means that you can actually do your own snow clearing. The Nordic V-plough it's called. So just an idea for people out there. Now there was obviously other methods and other ways to do it, but I thought that was probably one of the best. Nice and easy to put it on. And the last thing before we bring David on is from a website called yourdailyideas.com. Good news, first license granted to treat pain with medical cannabis. A license to treat pain with medical cannabis given the go-ahead. A license to treat chronic pain with medical cannabis has been granted here for the first time it was emerged. A 3-month agreement was given, the green light by the Department of Health to use the medical cannabis for people in constant agony. So, and that was in the UK. Now, you probably remember that we've had a license granted by Vera Tomei for her little girl who's suffering massive seizures from epilepsy. And this chap has been granted, I think it was a man that was granted the license as well. So it's all good news, folks. It's all a good sign that we're going down the right way and things are beginning to open up. So that's a good thing. Now, we're going to bring our guest on. Our guest is David Gallup. And David is the President and General Counsel for World Service Authority. And we were told about this World Passport a while ago by Carol Rosin. And so I for some reason we put it on the shelf, or maybe we just didn't get around to it, and then I decided I think we should look at that now to see what this is all about, a world passport, because a lot of people were kind of saying I've never heard of that before, I never knew that you could even get a world passport. So we've asked David to come on to talk to us about it and what's going on. So before we bring David in, Steve's going to read out a quick bio from David and then we'll get him on.
Okay, David specialises in promoting, implementing and educating about the human rights, world citizenship and world law. Mr. Gallup is President of the World Service Authority, Washington DC, a global public service human rights organisation founded in 1954. In addition to his role as President, he has served as General Counsel since 1992 and previously served as Vice President from 1994 to 1998.
Fantastic. Good evening, David. How are you doing?
Good evening, Alan and Steve. It's good to be with you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for coming on. This is very interesting, the World Passport. When you go over to your website and you go through the list of countries that kind of accept it, and I think, wow, that's quite a lot of countries. I didn't actually think there'd be so many. But before we get into talking about that, tell us a bit of history and how this all started and where it all came from.
Sure. Well, the impetus for the creation of the World Passport was the difficulties that a man named Gary Davis had after World War II. Gary Davis was a comedian, an actor on Broadway, and even though he was a very happy fellow and wanted to share his comedic sense with the world, unfortunately, during World War II, his brother's battleship was destroyed and his brother was killed. That event made Gary extremely upset, distraught, angry. So he decided to join the U.S. Air Force to bomb Hitler's war factories. But when he was up in that airplane, bombing cities and towns, he realized that he wasn't killing so-called military targets. He was killing men, children, women, civilians. And when he came back from the war, he said, "This is wrong. What have I done? I've killed my fellow human beings. How can I live with myself?" He became sort of inward. He had, well, then it was called shell-shocked, but now we'd call it post-traumatic stress from the war. And he said, "I've got to get out of this war system." And he said, "What can I do to make sure I and my fellow humans don't ever have to participate in a war again?" And what came to mind was, after reading a book called Anatomy of Peace by Emery Reeves, was that he needed to get out of this war system. So he went to Paris, tried to hand in his U.S. passport and give up his U.S. citizenship. But his father was a wealthy orchestra leader who had bands that played at different events from New York all the way down to Washington, D.C. And his father was telexing the U.S. Embassy to not let him renounce. It would be embarrassing for him as his wealthy band leader father, who had great connections politically and all, and for his son, who had come back as a war hero, for him to renounce his U.S. citizenship. Well, so the officials at the embassy said, "Well, Gary, come back in a few days and we'll see." So 3 days later, he came back to the embassy. And they said, "Well, why are you here?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to give up my citizenship as I was a few days ago." And they said, "Are you sure? We've been hearing from your father, etc." And so Gary's, the anger started welling up in him. And he said, "Look, if you don't give me the oath of renunciation in the next few minutes, I'm going to call Washington and report you for dereliction of duty, and you could lose your job." So the woman at the embassy rifled through her desk looking for the oath of renunciation. She found it. She got a Bible. She had him raise his hand. He gave the oath of renunciation. And of course, the second he stepped out of the U.S. Embassy in Paris, after having renounced his citizenship, after having to hand in his U.S. passport, he was in France illegally. He had no papers. And it just so happened that the UN was meeting in Paris at the Palais de Chaillot, the U-shaped building across from the Eiffel Tower. And they declared that territory international territory. It was really no longer France. And he decided, okay, why don't I become the first quote-unquote UN citizen? And so he decided to camp out on the steps of the UN in Paris. And he felt, well, this is international territory. I'll be fine. Well, what happened was the media from all around the world who happened to be in Paris for this UN meeting saw him there and saw what he was trying to do. And he really became world famous overnight. The French were plying him with wine and baguette and fromage, so he could eat. His only big concern was, well, where do I go to the bathroom? So fortunately, he was right near the commissary, the UN commissary, so he was able to go in to the building and then come back out to his sleeping bag. Well, he's held his ground for 6 nights and 7 days until the French police actually came in and dragged him out of international territory illegally and brought him back into France. Well, so this whole story started this process of him saying, look, I'm a citizen of the world. I'm not just a citizen of one nation. Although he had officially renounced it, he became stateless. And for many years, from 1948, when this happened in May of 48, until 1953 and then 1954, he had no documents. He was given documents by government officials like refugee identification documents, but he would generally always throw those away or rip those up and say, this does not represent me. I'm a human being with fundamental, universal, innate, and unalienable human rights. So after being imprisoned 20 times simply for having no documents, he said, I need to create a government and a document that represents me, the individual human being. And what I like to say about Gary is that he wasn't stateless. He became world full, meaning full of an understanding, a comprehension of this holistic planet that we live on and the ecosystem and how humans and the environment are all interacting in one way. And so in 1953, he decided in September of 1953 to create a government of, by, and for the people of the world. Although I can say that prior to this, the precedent for that actually was an international registry that he had created in Paris in 1949 and 1950 that registered almost 1 million people officially as world citizens. And Gary once told me that, David, yes, there was about 1 million people who had gotten world citizen cards at that point. But he said, we received about 8 million letters and postcards of support from people all over the world, even though maybe not all of them at that point had registered. But with this initial group of people, almost 1 million people who had registered, he said, well, now we can create a government for humanity, one that is democratic and participatory and upholds our universal rights universally for everyone everywhere, so that if you don't have a national citizenship or don't want that citizenship, it shouldn't matter. A modicum or a minimum of fundamental human rights should be respected for you. So that was in 1953, and then in January of 1954, he founded World Service Authority. Actually, it was originally called United World Service Authority, but after a little amount of time, he said, well, the world is actually already united. It's just us humans who don't or haven't recognized that fact yet. So then he dropped the word united from World Service Authority, and it simply became World Service Authority. And that was when, in 1954, that the World Passport was born. And it was a document that Gary Davis used his entire adult life. He only died a few years ago. He was almost 92 when he died. But it was the only passport he had from when he was 26 until he was almost 92. And he traveled, I don't know how many countries, 30 or 40 countries around the world with only his world passport. And he had adult children he would visit, because he lived near the end of his life, he lived in Burlington, Vermont. And he would travel into Canada back and forth with only his world passport. So it's a document that helped him identify himself as a world citizen, as a human being with rights, first and foremost. And after, of course, he issued the first one to himself, but after that, many, many passports were issued for free to refugees and stateless persons, and which we continue to do, actually. And then, of course, the passport has been issued generally to the global public since that time. That's the history behind World Service Authority and the passport.
Wow, okay, that's very interesting. And how's it been growing now since, obviously, you know, you said Gary passed away, but obviously it's been growing year on year, I'd say, with the amount of people applying. What's the amount of passports issued now, do you know?
Well, so we've issued between 750,000 and 1 million world passports. But we also issue other documents. We issue documents of other global documents of identification and travel, like a world identity card, a world birth card, and a world birth certificate. We continue to issue the world citizen card and certificate. We issue an exit visa and a residence permit for refugees and stateless people. We issue a world political asylum card for people such as yourselves in the professional media. We issue a World Media Association press card affirming your right to freedom of expression everywhere on planet Earth. So when you add all the documents together that we've issued, it's close to about 5 million documents since 1954, which is still actually a very small number when you think that certain nation states like the U.S. government may issue close to, 10 to 15 million passports a year. So you might say we're in the nascent or beginning stages of this holistic understanding of who we are on planet Earth as human beings first and foremost, and trying to unite at that level, which even seems under challenge right now with the propensity towards isolationist nationalism that seems to be springing up around the world. But I see that really more as sort of a last-ditch effort of the nation state to cling to the current paradigm before the paradigm shifts. And we're working towards shifting that paradigm.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the game that the powers to be, or maybe the powers that war want, is divide and conquer. It's an old game. They've been playing it for years, and that's what they want. And the whole idea that, we have factions, countries, religions fighting against each other. Once we're doing that, we're not watching what they're doing. But if we unite under one umbrella and say we're spiritual human beings, that's it, really, forget about nationality, forget about colour or country. I think that's when they'll get worried, and that's why they play this game, the divide and conquer game. Now, obviously, one of the questions, when I did come across the World Passport, I was looking at that. By the way, just while I remember, that media pass thing, I think me and Steve are going to look into that one. That might be handy for us. Always good to have that, because, you never know, to have a press pass. But the question that always comes to mind, and I think most people will be probably asking the question, is how readily accepted is the world passport going into Western countries and obviously foreign countries like Middle East and China and stuff like that?
Well, the world passport is both a symbol of our universal rights as well as a practical tool. And for some people, they probably find that they support it more on the symbolic level and may have actually had difficulty in exercising their rights while using it. And other people, on the opposite side of the coin, have had great success in using it to exercise their right to travel, to exercise their right to work, to exercise basic rights just in their day-to-day life, to perhaps open a bank account or sign some agreement, even at a very basic level, simply to enter an office building where you might need identification. Well, so let me break it down for you. There have been more than 185 countries, 185 since 1954, that have placed visa, entry, or exit stamps in world passports. That is about almost 95% of all countries have recognized the world passport on a case-by-case basis, meaning that each time someone presents it, it's a case of whether or not that particular border official will recognize it and stamp it, or at least let them in even if they don't stamp it. So what we encourage all world passport holders to do is to go to the nearest consulate or embassy, either in person or by mail, and submit their world passport for a visa, whether it's a tourist visa, a business visa, because once you have even one stamp in your world passport, it's much easier to get other stamps from other governments, because it's that bureaucratic mindset. If they see a passport that has already been stamped, the border official or the embassy or consular official won't take a second thought. They'll say, oh, this must be valid, and then they'll stamp it. So the recognition really comes in several forms. There is the recognition by the almost 1 million people who carry it. There's recognition by all of those countries, as I mentioned, who have placed stamps on the document. So that's, you could say, de facto recognition. There are 6 countries, Burkina Faso, Ecuador, Mauritania, Tanzania, Togo, and Zambia, that have officially recognized the world passport, meaning they've sent letters from their government or foreign ministry confirming that they would recognize it, although even those official governments could reject it. And then there's the legal basis for the world passport, which comes in the UN Charter, which affirms our fundamental human rights, in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which the majority of countries have recognized around the world. Even countries that you wouldn't think recognized a lot of treaties, like the U.S., has actually recognized that treaty. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is customary international law. Over 100 national constitutions affirm the right to freedom of travel. And then the very basic right to freedom of travel and freedom of identification that we have, I like to use the word innately, meaning we're born with it, and unalienably, meaning we can't give it up. We have this right to identify ourselves and our right to travel, and that's the basic underpinning, you might say, for the passport. So now, traveling in certain parts of the world, which you referred to, like North America and Western Europe, can be difficult for many people in the world, no matter what passport you're carrying, whether it's a national passport from a developing country or the world passport. You could be discriminated against economically. That's, I would say, probably one of the biggest forms of discrimination that goes on in the world, is how much money do you have in your pocket, or do you have a bank account? Because if you don't have a home, a family, a car, a steady job, and money in your bank account, the likelihood of you getting a visa in your national passport to get to, say, Great Britain, or Ireland, or to get to Canada or the U.S. or France or Germany or Spain is very difficult. So it's less a question of what passport you carry and more a question of where you're coming from and how much money you have. So, and once again, it's true with the world passport. We never want anyone to have a false expectation that their rights will always be respected when using the world passport, because they may not be. At any point, any one official can accept your document or reject it in a completely arbitrary and subjective fashion. It could simply be that the person is having a bad day, they had a fight with their spouse, and are taking it out on you. But of course, the governments should recognize it according to their international law and human rights law obligations. But so in the end, everyone should have a legitimate hope that our rights be respected. So let me put it this way. When you carry the world passport, you do become a human rights educator, a human rights activist. It is, you might say, to some small degree, a revolutionary act. You're saying, I am a human being, I'm identifying myself as such, and I want you to recognize my status as a human being first and foremost, which is certainly a challenge to the nation state, because nation states really don't want human beings traveling. They want national subjects who they can control. Sometimes when Gary Davis would go into Canada, he would say, he would go and present his world passport, and they would say, you know, we don't recognize this. And he would say, yes, but I do.
Yeah.
So, it was always a, open conversation with them, to get them to recognize the document.
Okay. Now, obviously, the next question has to be the follow-up to what you just said there. What if you turn up at a passport control office and they do reject the passport, and you've just kind of done all your flight preps and everything else, and you're flown in, and you're going on holiday or you're going on a business trip or something, and they turn around and go, sorry, we can't accept that. We're not going to let you into the country. Where do you stand?
Right. So this is why we always tell people, which I said before, is to go to the consulate first, because if you simply show up at an airport without a visa and your world passport, there's a good likelihood that you might be rejected. And it could be the airline, it could be the security administrations or the Custom and Border Patrol, or even if all three of those let you board the plane and you get through the customs, you arrive in the next frontier, and they see your passport and it doesn't have a stamp, they could say no to you. Let me give you a quick example of that. There was a fellow, this was about a year ago, who was going to go to the Dominican Republic, and he had gone to the consulate, and they said, oh, you're an American, you don't need a visa to go to the Dominican Republic. So he got on the plane with his world passport, he got through TSA, Transportation Security Administration, and Customs, he arrived in Dominican Republic. And they looked at his passport and they said, well, where's your visa? And he said, well, I was told at the consulate I don't need a visa because I'm an American. And they said, well, yes, but you're not traveling as an American, you're not showing me a U.S. passport. So they actually sent him back to the United States. And so in that case, he should have insisted from the Dominican Republic consulate to give him that visa, demanded it, basically. And let me say this. We tell all world passport holders, we inform them that when they apply or once they get their documents, that we have a legal advocacy department. And that was why I came to World Service Authority back in 1992 in the first place, was to establish WSA's legal department. What we do on a day-to-day basis is to draft legal validity letters. We draft amicus curiae, friend of the court briefs. We draft affidavits of support. We petition intergovernmental commissions and governmental authorities, mostly through legal letter writing campaigns, but sometimes through online petitioning mechanisms or through ombudsmen. And we demand that people's rights be respected. For example, we'll write a letter that explains that an individual is an authorized holder of the passport, that it's valid and legal. We do the research for the passport holder to prove that that particular national government, whatever it is, has, even in their national constitution, affirmed the right to freedom of travel, or even if they haven't in their constitution, that government is a party to a particular convention, like the European Convention on Human Rights or the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And we put all that data in the letter and we send it to the officials. Sometimes we'll write letters all the way up to heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, queens, kings, etc., to demand that someone's rights be respected. So sometimes we do that before someone travels, and that can be a big help them to get the visa or to help them to get into the country. Of course, we do that more frequently probably after someone might have been rejected, for example, at a consulate. So we always try to back up the validity of the documents through our legal department. And it's not always easy. I'm not saying that when you use the world passport, you won't get stopped at a border or you won't be rejected by a consulate. You very well might be. And this is why we tell people, look, this is one tool, one option among several that you might have. If you can have a national passport or another passport as well as this, why not? I mean, really, the idea of passports is probably going to disappear pretty soon anyway. I mean, Gary Davis would say that the world passport is really an anti-passport. The point is to get rid of passports altogether because our body is our passport. That our mind, you could say, maybe is our passport. It carries us to where we need to go. I mean, when you show up at a frontier, whether you have a document or not, you have an innate and inalienable right to be there. I mean, of course, unless you're harming somebody, that would be different. But when you show up and you deboard an airplane, for example, the border official knows that you're not a grizzly bear. They know that you're not a shark. They know that you're a human being with rights, and they should affirm those rights.
That's right. We have a chap over here, Ben Gilroy, is very good at fighting for the common man. And he got arrested one time by the Gardaí, which is the police over here. And the police said, we need ID. And he said, well, you don't need ID. He says, I know who I am. And he goes, no, we need ID. And he gave them, I think he gave them this driving license. And the Gardaí, and he said, if you think that's me, well then arrest the driving license, because that's not me. That's a driving license. I'm me. So then it goes to the argument that we're so used to this. Well, ID, we need to identify. He said, but I know. I look in the mirror. That's me. I know it's me. But I have to ask you, what's your experience dealing with Ireland? Any issues with Ireland? Any experiences or stories that you can tell us?
Well, we've only seen just a few stamps from Ireland over the years, and I don't know why that is. I mean, I think maybe more people have tried to make it into like Heathrow or Gatwick in London rather than going to Ireland. I don't know why that is. Maybe partly because of it sort of being an island country and not linked to a major continent, you might say, perhaps, or it's harder to get to. So we've only seen a few examples of recognition by the government of Ireland. And so unfortunately, I don't have many stories from Ireland. I mean, I can certainly tell you in England that Gary Davis was even locked up, you could say, by the Queen's authority when he went to England, and he only had his world passport. It's kind of a funny story when Queen Elizabeth was being sworn in as queen, inaugurated as queen. Yep. Gary happened to be in Brixton prison, and there was a prison guard who Gary, hollered out to, and he said, "Look, I have a little note for the Queen." And the guard was like, "No, you can't write to the Queen." And Gary's like, "Why not? She's another human being. I want to congratulate her on becoming queen." And he said, "No, I can't send that. I can't send that letter out for you. No, there's no way this can happen." So Gary insisted, he pleaded with the guard, and finally the guard said, "Okay, if it'll make you happy, I'll take your letter and we'll see what happens." So then, the guard's hand was sort of shaking when he was taking the letter. He really didn't want to be involved in this, but he felt, I guess, that Gary had some minimum amount of rights to express himself. So he took the letter, and believe it or not, about 2 weeks to 3 weeks later, on royal stationery, there was a little response from Queen Elizabeth that said, "Thank you, Mr. Davis, for your kind wishes on my becoming queen." And the guard came and handed it to Gary with a big smile on his face, and he said, "I guess you can write to the Queen." So, I mean, that was just a little lesson in the power of one individual certainly for the prison guard, of course, as well as for Gary.
So during the Queen's coronation, he was in Brixton. How long was he in Brixton for?
Oh gosh, at that point, because he's been like, I think overall in his life, he's been in prison. He was in prison 34 times. And that time, I think it was about 2 months. And then I think that was then that they sent him back on a ship back to the United States not long later.
Why would they keep him in jail for 2 months when all he did was have a world passport?
Well, because governments don't always want to recognize that document. They say, to see you fit into the pigeonhole of a particular nation. And if you don't, then we don't want you. It's really arbitrary detention. But governments can actually hold people in arbitrary detention, I would say maximum for a year, before they have to release the person on their own recognizance or send them away. So it's just because governments want to maintain control over their so-called territory. And if you challenge that, then you're considered perhaps a threat.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of people challenging the government these days, and it's all a threat to the government. They don't like people stepping out across the line or stepping outside of the dogma on what we're told to do and what we're not told to do. So I can definitely understand why Gary might have been approached and taken away and put in Brixton prison and other prisons as well. Because of that, this is the issue. Well, people are beginning to wake up to the system and realise that it's all about control, and they're not accepting it anymore, which is good to see. And we have a few questions in there, so I'll pass you over to Steve. Steve,
sure,
yes. Okay, the first question that I have is actually one of my own, and for a long time we've kind of been fighting kind of against this whole one world government. But if one gets a world passport, then are we not kind of condoning like the one world government?
Well, we already actually have, you might say, a world government in several different forms that you may not be aware of that are acting in the background, that we've accepted, you might say implicitly, and because they're either acting as a service to us or they're natural, we accept them. So there are really three forms of world government already functioning: natural or nature, social, and conceptual. So let me just quickly explain what I mean and sort of allay your concerns about the idea of, the new world order or one world government as a problem. Well, so we're there, just as you referred to at the beginning of the show, you've had this horrible snowstorm that's put out power. People can't get out of their own community to come to work. And we had a similar storm here over this last weekend where there's about 1 million people up the whole eastern seaboard of the United States out of electricity, and also major snow. So we have to deal with nature, with our parent Earth, I like to say, because that's already a government. It's a world government of nature. And we need to respect it better than we are. If we don't care for our parent, which is the Earth, then it's going to fight back against us and start killing us. And this is why I think we're seeing more people get diseases like cancer because of the carcinogens that we ourselves as humans are putting into the Earth. We are seeing more severe weather conditions because of the way humans are interacting with our environment. So we have to be respectful of the world government, which is nature. Then there's a second world government that's already functioning. That's a social, you might say, a social world government. And a good example of that is, for example, very young children and the elderly, generally in all societies, and of course there are a few exceptions, but in all societies, we take care of our very young, like babies, and our very old. And the reason we do that is because we know, as caring, sympathetic, and even empathetic humans, that we have to take care of our fellow people in our species. And we do that. It's natural. It's part of like the world social system.
Yeah.
Like a better example of a social world government. Let me ask you, Ellen and Steve, have you heard of the Universal Postal Union, the UPU?
UPU, Universal Postal. It doesn't ring a bell, no.
Okay, well, but you've used it. If you've ever sent a letter anywhere in the world, you've used the Universal Postal Union. So if I asked you who the executive director of the Universal Postal Union is, since you hadn't heard of it, you probably wouldn't know. But it's a man named Bashar Hussein, and he's been there for several years now, the executive director. So what I like to say is there's already a world government of the post, you might say, that's functioning in the background of society, that is not harming anyone, but as any good government is providing us a service to you and me. So like, say I want to send a postcard to my Aunt Millie in Tokyo. If I properly put on the fee, the fine, or the stamp, you might say, the postage on it, I properly address it in the correct place, then that postcard, generally within about 10, 12 days, will get to my Aunt Millie in Tokyo. So I've been able to express my right to freedom of expression by writing her a postcard. I've paid the postal service a fee to send it. They send it out and she gets it. And so there's a whole bunch of rules and regulations behind that system to make it work. And it's all functioning in the background. That's the kind of, you might say, functioning global governmental system that Gary Davis was interested in creating at the global level, and that the World Passport is just a part of. And I guess let me finish really quick the thought of the final idea of world government, you might say, that's already functioning. And that's a conceptual one, that we all have, you might say, principles or ideology that we are running our day-to-day lives on, and whether that's justice or freedom or even peace. These are terms that all human beings, if we've had some amount of education, can think about. And even if we haven't had some amount of education, they're sort of come naturally in our mind of, I want to be free. I don't want to have constraints on me, that everyone has. And this is sort of, you could say, a world government of the concept, you might say, or of the ideology that, and of course, for World Service Authority, the principle is that there's one Earth and one humanity. And the ideology is really human rights. We have universal rights that should be universally respected. So how do we get those rights respected? And I think the reason why we fear, when I say we, I mean all humans, fear government, is because so far, a lot of the examples we've had of government have been really negative. They haven't really been a service to you and me. They've been an oppression. Actually, I mean that's not true it's not really true for most governments. There's many governments that act in that way, but we have a lot of governments. I mean, just look at your local community. In your city, there's a town hall and a mayor, or there's a city council, and these people, hopefully, many of them are generally doing it because they want to be there to help their fellow humans, and they're doing some good to maintain the roads or the infrastructure or the school system. So we human beings are naturally social creatures, but we do need rules. We need rules so it isn't the Wild West, so that we can be a service to each other, and that's what government is supposed to be. So if you ask, if Gary Davis were still alive and you asked him about government, he would say, well, it shouldn't be something that we should fear. It should be something that we participatorily and globally can create. We just have to do it. But the first step is to see ourselves as world citizens. Unless we take that first step to understand that we really are one human family, we can't go beyond that. And if you will indulge me, let me just go through this idea of sort of government. So, and what precedes it. So the first step you might say is law. To work together as humans, we might first put down some rules, whether it's rules on the cave wall, whether it's rules like you might find at a public swimming pool. There's always some rules there usually to protect us, right? Once we sort of create those rules, we've established, sort of a community. And then once you have a community, you really kind of have a citizenship. And I don't mean citizenship in an oppressive way, but a citizenship of rights, you might say, and duties within a particular communal framework. And then once you have law and then citizenship, then you can create governmental institutions to help you to arbitrate when there are disputes, to deal with difficulties when people are trying to come up with better ways to serve each other and to serve their society. And then you generally have peace. So you have law, citizenship, government, and then peace. So if you put the word national in front of those, you have national law, right, within a particular nation or framework. You have national citizenship, whether it's Irish citizenship or Canadian citizenship or Ghanaian citizenship, whatever. You have that citizenship of people who are in that particular communal framework wanting to uphold that law. Then you create that governmental institution, whether it's your parliament or some kind of, or even a smaller level, like I said, a city council. You have a national government. And then generally that leads to national peace, right? Generally it's relatively rare, although we're seeing some really horrible examples like in Syria of internal wars, civil wars, you might say, although those civil wars have become global because there's outside actors who are putting in, unfortunately, a lot of money and weapons into both sides, you might say the rebels and the government. So it's not really completely an internal war anymore. But anyway, generally if you have national law, national citizenship, national government, you have national peace. But if you have national law, national citizenship, national government, will you have world peace? And I would argue that no. And we have seen that since the UN was founded, there's been about 250 wars. So the UN has not rid the world of the scourge of war as it was really meant to do, because it's not a government. It has no parliament. It has no legislative power, and not really any enforcement power. So what we're saying is we need world law. Then we can become, and we see ourselves as world citizens to uphold that law. We create world governmental institutions, for example, a world parliament or a world court of human rights, and that should in the end lead to world peace, because peace is not the absence of war, it's the presence of law.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to take in there. Yeah, I think we'll argue the point regarding the government when you said people are there to try and help the system and the people. Yeah, okay, we'd argue that point in Ireland. It's a cesspit of corruption over here. People are very, very aware of it, and I'm sure America's the same thing. And we all know that the whole lot needs to be tidied up, regardless of what country you're in. There is probably an element of that, and there is a level of tidying up being done at the moment. It's not going to happen overnight, but things are taking place, which is a good thing. Now, we do have more questions coming in, so we'll try and just watching the time there. Steve, you have more questions there for David?
Yeah, just in relation to actually getting one of these world passports. If you just kind of give us a quick overview of what is the procedure? Because normally if I go for a passport here, I have to go into a dedicated office, I have to get photographs taken, I have to fill out an application form, and it's all done that way. But I mean, if we were getting one of these, I'm guessing it's obviously through America. We have to obviously send the information to America. So what would be What kind of security is in place to ensure that I'm not getting a false passport and, maybe, just kind of...
You're trying to pretend to be somebody you're not to get into a country.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. That's always a concern, not only for us as the organization that's issuing these documents, but obviously organizations outside. And I can tell you we do work with any policing authority if there's ever an issue with an individual who might have gotten a world passport or they might think even has gotten a world passport. We work with all control or policing authorities to resolve any issues that might come up. But to go back to tell you the process, it's a simple process. People can either come to our office in Washington, D.C. and get documents issued even the same day or certainly the same week. That happens a few times a week where people do come into our office. But generally, majority of applicants apply either by mailing in their pre-filled out, they've already filled out their application form. They mail it in by post or some courier service with their photos, with their identification documents to certify who they are. Or more recently, we've been accepting documents, usually in the form of a PDF, where people will submit their applications to our info@worldservice.org email address and apply that way. But just because we've gotten a form from an individual actually does not mean that we will necessarily issue the documents. We have a compliance program, which internally, and I would even say externally, we are required by law to verify and vet every single person. What that means is we have various tools and various lists that we go to verify that a person is not, for example, a terrorist or trafficker of weapons of mass destruction or some otherwise a criminal that might do harm. So, of course, before we issue a document to anyone, we're going to make sure that we cross-reference to make sure a person isn't in that kind of situation. Now, there have been a few interesting circumstances where, for example, there are places that are blocked by the United States government completely. And if you happen to be an individual, for example, in a certain country like Iran, we cannot issue a document to you. It doesn't matter whether you're quote-unquote Iranian. If you are Irish and living in Iran, we could not issue a document to you because that country is completely blocked by the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the United States Department of Treasury. So what that means is if we wanted to issue somebody, and there was a woman, sad story of a woman who was forcibly married to her cousin, and it happened to be that she was gay. So not only was she found it reprehensible to be, sort of incestual to have to be married to a cousin, but of course she also didn't want to be married to a man. So we actually had to apply for a special license from the U.S. government to be able to try to help that woman, which it took about a year and a half, believe it or not. It was very slow, but we were able to get that license and then issue for free to that particular person a world passport to try to help her to get out of Iran and go to another country. So there are certain blocks of countries, there are certain blocks on people because of their prior activities. So once again, we vet everybody. We're comfortable in how we go through this process. Now, but I have to say, once again, and this is true with whether it were the Irish passport or any passport, the government might issue the document to you and you're perfectly fine and everything is okay with you today. But in a year from now, maybe something goes wrong in your life or in your mind and then you become violent, right? That could happen at any time. We don't have a bureau of pre-crime like you might read in Philip K. Dick's science fiction story, The Minority Report. We don't have that. So we don't know what's in people's minds. So, I mean, there's always a possibility with any passport in the world that someone later on could get involved in criminal or even terroristic activity. But so we do our due diligence to make sure that who we're issuing documents to are people who take that responsibility seriously. And I have to say that when you fill out the application form for the World Passport, you have to put out all your personal information. You get it either notarized or you attach a copy of a valid ID that you already have. And then the individuals, like I said, we vet from our side, and we want to make sure that people know their obligations. So there's an attestation of understanding on the application form that says that the applicant is solely responsible for the use of the document. They have to swear that the information on the form is true and correct. So, I mean, this is true for any government issuing a document. We do our due diligence to make sure that who we're issuing to are people who will use it properly and effectively. But of course, in the end, if they don't, which is always a possibility, as I said, we'll work with policing authorities to deal with that.
Okay, and what's the cost of the passport?
Well, so there's 4 different levels of validity, and the reason we do that is because we know that certain people in certain circumstances, although they may not be a refugee or stateless or something, may be extremely low income or at the poverty line or something, and we encourage them to find some kind of organization like a church or an NGO to sponsor their form. And then, of course, we do issue a small percentage of documents for free to refugees and stateless people, as well as economically deprived people. So the 4 levels of passport are the minimum is a $55 fee for a 3-year validity passport, a $75 fee for issuance of a 5-year passport, $100 for the 10-year, and then we have what's called our World Donor Passport. It comes in a special reddish maroon colored cover. It's valid for 15 years and requires a donation of $400 or more to our refugee fund. And the reason we do that is because that people who apply for that donor passport, they're the donor and they receive the donor passport. That then allows us, of course, to provide those free documents to refugees in camps. It actually allows us to provide free legal advocacy to refugees, like I said before, writing legal briefs to support their right either to stay in a country if they found a safe haven or to go elsewhere. So those are the 4 main passports, but as I said, we have things like our World ID card, which has a $25 fee. Our World Birth Certificate has a $25 fee. We also have even a World Political Asylum card, and that has a $20 fee. And once again, registering as a world citizen, we offer a World Citizen Card and Certificate, which is your affirmation of your link to humanity and the earth. And that World Citizen Card and Certificate, they come together. That's a $30 fee. And let me make something clear to everybody listening. You do not give up any lower level allegiance when you claim world citizenship. You're still Irish or French or whatever. You keep that lower level status, and you're just adding that higher coherence, that higher awareness of your link to humanity and the earth when you register as a world citizen. So you're not giving up anything. You're actually gaining when you register as a world citizen.
Okay. Steve, you got more questions there for David?
Yeah, we do. Just very quickly, if someone is applying, and let's say they're applying from Ireland, is an old Irish passport, would that be good enough as identification?
Yes, of course. Now, of course, even if that passport has expired, as long as it was valid when it was issued, that should be fine. We would accept it because, like I said, we'll still do some other vetting of that applicant in addition to the Irish copy of the Irish passport.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the captain on People's Internet Radio asks, can you ask what happens if you hit trouble in another country, like you're arrested or robbed of your money? With a normal passport, you can go to the embassy for help and they will even fly you home if needed.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not to that, we don't have that capacity, I would say, yet to be able to provide round-the-clock, 24/7 assistance to passport holders. That's why when we issue it, we make it clear that it is your personal property. It's unlike a national passport, which is actually the property of the national government. The world passport becomes your personal property once it's issued to you, so you become fully responsible for its use. You have to know your rights. We do give everybody a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, usually, if we can, in their language, so that they can know their rights. We give a how-to guide with the passport and various information flyers to help people to know how to use it. And as I said, we do have a legal department, but our ability to assist somebody who's in a situation like that where everything's lost or whatever, at a minimum, we could, of course, issue a replacement world passport very quickly. But to help them to, if they've lost all their money and to recuperate that or to fly them back, unfortunately, we just don't have that capacity at this point.
Okay, that's fair enough. What about international driving licenses? O'Darby is wondering, do you issue those also?
No, that's been sort of a bone of contention over many years. Gary Davis, when he was alive, would say, look, although we have maybe a civic privilege to drive, do we really have a fundamental human right to drive? I mean, when there are other ways that we can move ourselves around on the planet, because, of course, at least for now, the internal combustion engine in a car is causing a lot of pollution and degradation of the environment, which is affecting our other fundamental human right, which is a right to a healthy environment. So he would always say that we don't really have a right to drive. And if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights, although it does affirm the right to freedom of movement, it doesn't say specifically buy a car. So that we have never issued an international driving permit or license. But I have, of course, there are many options to get those by various organizations. And I've heard that there's some small island countries, for example, in the Caribbean, that might issue an international driving permit based upon the International Driving Convention that would allow you to travel or drive anywhere even if you don't have the local driver's license or permit, with the exception of that country, where that country is located. Like in that country, you couldn't use it there.
Okay. And what about where's the question? Yeah, for Paddy and also Laurie are wondering who funds the World Service, and because Laurie goes on, she's actually saying something doesn't ring true to me over this. Is it just me? She says, it's not sitting well with her. Do you get many people like who would kind of say that to you?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I mean, everybody has a good intention in their mind to question what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. I think that's extremely important. I mean, you find out about anything on the internet, you really better do your research before you get involved in any way. So yeah, of course, this ideology of even world citizenship is a challenge to people, but our funding comes, what I think is so amazing about World Service Authority is that the only funding we get is from you, the global public. We do not get any funding from any government, from any foundation, from any organization, from any, major wealthy donor. It's all the issuance fees that we charge for the issuance of the documents. So the only people we have to accommodate is the global public, the people who have demanded this service and have been requesting this service since 1954. So whatever, almost 63, almost 64 years. And so I feel good about the fact that we don't have to listen to some wealthy donor or big foundation, and them telling us what we have to do. What we have to listen to is you, the public, and make sure that we're helping you to affirm your rights. But once again, people should be always wary. And we never want anyone to get a world passport who doesn't think effectively that they could use it or is concerned about their ability to claim their human rights. If you don't have that sort of mindset, that I would call it to refer to Star Wars, the Obi-Wan Kenobi mindset, that you have this idea in your mind that you know what's right, you know what your rights and responsibilities are, and you can forcefully state them and present yourself in a polite, professional, persistent, and patient way with proof of your rights. Well, then it may not be for you. I mean, we're not saying everyone necessarily should get a world passport if they don't feel that they'll be effectively capable of exercising their rights with it. But let me put it this way. A lot of people also get the passport because they simply want to promote and support the ideology of the fact that we are on only one Earth. We only have one planet and one humanity. We should be living and loving each other, living with each other, loving each other, not fighting and killing each other.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree on that. And the whole idea of being a sovereign person, I think that's the important thing, that being sovereign and having your world passport might be going hand in hand together, and knowing that you are sovereign, a sovereign being on the planet. I think that's important, and we've mentioned that before in the show, which is quite very, very important. We have more questions there, Steve, I think.
We do. Where is it? Why the enormous extra cost for printing the longer duration passport? I think that's obviously for the 15-year passport. Well, it doesn't seem that exorbitant to me, especially when you've just said you're not funded. So I mean, it's kind of how you would kind of survive. I mean, even the 70, did you say $75? I think it was $75. I mean,
yes, for the 5 years.
That's not that's not too mad either, because I mean, if you were to get a passport here in Ireland, you're going to pay, I think it's somewhere in the region of 80 to 100 euro. Now, I mean, that's probably something similar in dollars as well. So
can you imagine going to Ryanair, because Ryanair require a passport? So it'd be a good test that if you got a world passport. Ryanair is one of the carriers over here in Ireland, and they fly to the UK, and Aer Lingus is the Irish airline, and Ryanair is just another airline that has that goes to when they fly to an airport, they fly to an external airport, not kind of one of the mainstream airports, an airport that's probably about 30 or 40 miles away from the city. It's all got to do with reduced costs and flying. Now, Aer Lingus, who's the Irish airport, do not require you to have a passport when you fly over to the UK, but Ryanair do require a passport. So I'd be just curious if somebody actually did get a world passport and went to Ryanair and said, I'm flying to the UK and this is the passport I'm going to be using, just to see what they say.
Be also interesting, you know, the way sometimes here, if you go into government buildings or you're applying for a benefit of some description, they do ask for identification, either a driving license, passport, or a birth certificate. It'd be interesting to kind of just get one and just use it and just kind of see where it's accepted.
Well, David said about the consulate idea. So if you get it stamped by the Irish Embassy, and they stamp it and send it back to you, well then there's your starter for 10.
Exactly.
Because if they stamp it, then there's recognition from them. I think that's probably the first port to call, David, if you got your world passport, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I would say before you even try a more difficult country to enter like Ireland or England or Germany or Spain or Belgium, where certainly in the past, I know in England and I know in Belgium even recently, world passport holders have had their passports seized or I would say illegally confiscated. I would say first you start with a country in part of the world that has much more frequently recognized the passport, like in Africa or Asia or Latin America and the Caribbean, for example. So you might first go to the consulate, either in person if you have one close by, or it could be done by mail, like maybe Laos or Vietnam or Guinea in Africa, or maybe Honduras or Guatemala in Latin America. You get a stamp. You don't have to go to those countries, but once you have a stamp in your world passport from one of those countries, and then you go to the consulate of, say, Ireland, they might say, well, we don't recognize the passport, but they can't say that the passport is illegitimate because they will see that another government has already recognized it. But I certainly can say, to your listeners, especially if it's a majority of population of people in Ireland, that I would be a little bit concerned about using only a world passport, for example, to try to get into England if you didn't have a backup Irish passport. Only because, once again, even though we've been around since 1954, we're really at the beginning stages of this world citizenship movement, of this world citizenship ideology, and even of the success of the world passport. We're always working hard at our office through our legal campaigns and our social media campaigns to raise awareness. But there is pushback. There's great pushback by national governments who don't want to see authority, like you said, or sovereignty among the people. They fear that.
Okay, Steve.
Yes, where are we going? Shane had a question earlier. Can you ask if there's any Open Society or Soros funding involved? But you've already kind of said that the funding is basically by the people who get the passports.
Yeah, nothing from Soros.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Joan said earlier, is it true that the Postal Service, the union, has more control than we think? She says, I think Dave Wynne Miller spoke on this point.
Well, yeah, like I said, just to be able to function in our world society and have a postal service pretty much in almost every country in the world that functions, they do have a bigger role than we're even aware of. But once again, I may be wrong, but I see it as benevolent. They're really there to help us to exercise our right to freedom of expression. That's what you do when you send a letter to somebody. You're expressing yourself. So I see it as something positive. I mean, your audience is not even thinking about is that even when you send an email, maybe that email only costs, 1/10 or 1/100th of a penny, right? Or a pence. There is cost to that, and you're paying somebody, and there is an infrastructure there that is like a global government. It's the internet we're all netizens, like they used to say back in 1994. We still are. I mean, although even that is becoming balkanized and nationalized. And for example, there are certain places in the world where I think our website is not even allowed to be seen. And that may even be true for Open Your Mind Radio, that there's places where your radio station you can't hear because certain governments don't want people to hear it. But in the background, there are these institutions that are functioning, hopefully benevolently, to support our rights, whether it's the rights to information, like through the internet and through emails, or the right to express ourselves just through the regular postal service.
I'll probably be North Korea, don't you think, Steve?
No, I had a chat with your man over there, whatever his name is.
Kim Dong-bong.
Kim Dong.
Yeah, him. No, we're getting out there loud and clear.
We're getting promoted. Okay, no problem at all. Right, okay, so let's just have a quick chat about this media pass that you told us about. What's that all about?
Okay, well, so probably I think it was in the 1970s that Gary Davis created a World Media Association, one to have a platform himself to appear at our National Press Club in Washington, D.C., but also to be able to appear at events as a journalist because we used to have a great newsletter called World Citizen News, which sort of has, just because of cost constraints, has sort of fallen by the wayside. But he was the editor and chief writer or journalist for World Citizen News, and he wanted to be able to attend press events around the world. But his world passport wasn't always recognized for a press event because they're like, well, that's a passport, you need a press pass. So he decided, why don't we create a World Media Association so everyone in any kind of media capacity, now it's social media, but even in the standard forms of media like radio or the newspaper or television broadcast, that people should be able to, even if they don't necessarily belong to some main media association like the Associated Press or CNN or something, that they should still be able to, even as an individual freelance journalist, be able to attend various press events. So that's when we started issuing this World Media Association press card back in the 70s. It's in multiple languages, like all of our documents. It's in English, French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Arabic, and Esperanto, and that can be helpful in various parts of the world that you have a media card that's in multiple languages. So it's, we don't issue many of those anymore, I have to say, but it is something that is available to the media public, you might say, to help affirm Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I would encourage all listeners to take a look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because it is a wonderful restatement or reaffirmation of our rights. But Article 21 affirms that fundamental human right of all of us to freedom of expression. So the point of it is to support not only journalists who might be under pressure. I mean, there are already organizations like Journalistes Sans Frontières, Journalists Without Borders, and there are other organizations that support journalists who are like in war-torn areas who are getting shot at and other things, and who certainly have more probably history in supporting journalists than we have had the funding for, I would have to say. But certainly, we support, so on the journalist side of participating in the field of sharing information and knowledge, but also on the public side, so that we, the public, can get access freely to information that hopefully is not overly corrupted by special interests. Yeah, no, that's it's a good idea, and as I say, I'm sure you'll get an awful lot of interest to people globally. I think you would benefit from having a European office if the finances were there or the funding was there to have a European office, so you're covering both sides. I would love that. In fact, we do have a small number of what I call representatives of the organization, which we started this process back in 1954. The office started in New York, and then it moved to France, where Gary Davis was, and then it actually moved to Basel, Switzerland. So we were in Switzerland for many years, up until about 1976 or 77, when the principal or headquarters office moved to Washington, D.C. And while that was happening, Gary Davis initiated this process of representatives. So we still have some representatives in various parts of the world, like in Lebanon, like in Germany, like in Canada, and a few other places where, someone who speaks the local language can speak to the public about world citizenship or about the world passport and what it represents. But I would love to see us open an office, of course, again, in Europe. Once again, like you said, though, it's a question of funding. And at this point, just even to maintain our office in Washington, D.C. is sometimes a struggle, because there is this pushback by governments and even the public who don't maybe understand what we're trying to do in the long run, which is to have a peaceful world. I mean, really, the final, might say the vision statement of World Service Authority is world peace through world law and world citizenship. That the ultimate goal, and certainly this was the goal of Gary Davis in his lifetime, was to live in a world where there's never a war again, that we can function and use all of our human and natural resources for the good of all. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean,
It's the utopian society. At the end of the day, I hope it goes down that way, and we can get rid of these borders, because they're all man-made and it's all about control. But David, we've reached that part of the interview. Oh, we've one more question we're going to just throw in there before we finish things up.
Sure. Yeah, a question from People's Internet Radio chat. I did get the screen capture of the passport from Switzerland, but the question is the passport recognised by the UPU Switzerland? Now, Switzerland is mentioned on the list of the countries that do accept it. So, can we say yes, it's accepted by the UPU Switzerland?
Well, let me put it this way: the only way we know that the world passport has been recognized by any country, first of all, is there are two ways. One, passport holders return their passport to World Service Authority for renewal when it expires. So you have a 10-year passport, for example. After 10 years, when it expires, we allow one renewal in that same passport, because there's page 3 of the passport that allows us to put new stamps and seals on that passport to renew it. So it will be valid for another 10 years. When people send them in, of course, the first thing we do is review the 19 or 20 or so pages for visas to see if there are any stamps on them. And of course, if there are, we take a scan of those stamps to put in our archive of all of the recognition that we've gotten over the years. So that's one way. The other way is passport holders themselves, when they get a stamp, and the most recent one I think was from Laos. It was I think a work authorization and like a 3-month or 6-month stamp for an individual to go there. So we see now people emailing us scans of their passports with the stamps that they get. So the Switzerland in particular, and it's been a long time though, we did get a stamp. I think it was probably an entry stamp from some official at a border in Switzerland, which, once again, the majority of countries on our list of 187, I think, is the exact number of countries that have recognized it. Some of those countries have only recognized it on one or a few occasions, but the majority of countries have recognized it on multiple occasions. But once again, I think I ought to make it extremely clear to your audience that the wealthiest countries like U.S. and Canada, like France, Germany, England, Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, Ireland, these countries do not frequently recognize the passport in violation of human rights. Although all of those governments have in the past, and although all of them should respect our fundamental human rights, oftentimes because of whatever reason, economic or whatever, they will reject a world passport holder. So if your sole purpose is to go to Ireland with this and you're coming from another place, I would say, well, that's not necessarily a good reason to get it, because the likelihood of you getting there, whether it's on your national passport if you're coming from the developing world or the world passport, is pretty minimal, unless you have another basis for going, like political asylum. You're trying to get asylum from persecution. Well, then this may be, for you as a refugee, this may be the only document in the world that you can get. But for the standard person who's simply trying to exercise their right to travel, once again, it may not be enough as a standalone document to help you in all circumstances in the wealthiest parts of the world.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair comment. It's good to have that warning to let people know. Well, David, we've reached that time of the interview. A big thank you for coming on and clarifying that and telling us all about the world passport. Our listeners obviously will decide for themselves. I'm sure they'll be showing interest. Go over to the website and all that kind of stuff and have a look. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your contact information where people can find out more about the World Service and the services that you offer. Steve.
Well, worldservice.org is the website there, and there's a lot of information on that. I have posted up some links during the programme just in relation to where you can find the information, and also the list of countries that Gary spoke about, or that David spoke about. David.
It's David. Gary Davis was the founder.
That's right. Sorry. So
that's
it's David. Okay. I've put up the link there where people can actually see that, and all the scans of the passports as well. A little bit of information. The Irish one that is on there is dated 1997, so they did actually accept that at some point in time. It will be definitely worthwhile trying. For anyone who wants to find out more information, where can they get that? I know they can get it on worldservice.org. Is there any other sources that we could point people to as well?
Well, of course, if anyone wants to make it a very simple process, they can just send an email to info@worldservice.org, and we will send about a 3-page email that explains the entire process for applying, as well as attach as a PDF the application form for the passport, ID, registering as a world citizen, etc., and include a how to participate flyer, which encourages people to join us on social media at our Twitter or Facebook accounts or Instagram, etc. And we have a YouTube channel. I just put up a wonderful, I think, extremely interesting video from one of the vice president of WSA, whose name is Nathaniel Mills. He's an Olympic. He was an Olympic speed skater. He's now, well, of course, has his own Olympism project. But it was about a 2-hour conversation where he talks about how do we transcend nationalism in the perspective of the Olympics or through sports. So take a look at our YouTube channel and all those. There are links from worldservice.org to all of that.
Brilliant stuff. All right, David, stay with us there for a minute. We're just going to go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com and peoplesinternetradio.com.
Okay, yes, we're back. Everybody wants to rule the world, and if you want your world passport, worldservice.org is the place to go. As I mentioned, I don't have a passport at the moment, so it might be worth taking a punt just to see what actually happens, even for a 5-year. I think that was the minimum. It would definitely be worth just trying to just see how I get on. Not that I'm going anywhere, unless we have a holiday fund for me. But there we go. Yeah, great information anyway.
Okay, right. Our next guest, as we mentioned earlier in the show, was Trevor Eivers. Now, as you all know, the Open Mind Conference was scheduled to be on yesterday, Saturday, for us anyway. It's over the 3 days, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and we were supposed to be on yesterday. And due to severe weather conditions, which is completely out of everybody's control, it was the safest thing, we feel anyway, for Trevor to call it, to say not to come down, because if anybody did have an accident, then, it would have marred kind of the whole conference. So I think it was a good call. But we're going to bring Trevor in and have a chat to him about it and get his take and his feelings on it. Good evening, Trevor. How are you doing?
Hi, guys.
Right. Yeah, well, there you go. The act of God. We got snow that we haven't had close to in over 50 years. And it just happens to be just near the weekend that we have the Open Mind Conference, all this bad weather comes in and kind of puts a kibosh on it. How do you feel? Obviously, you're gutted, because I know you've spent so much time, you and the team have spent so much time getting this organised and getting everybody booked in and everything. It's just, heart-wrenching. But give us your take on it.
Well, as you said already, personally, I'm absolutely gutted, and so are the team. There was a lot of tears shed Thursday morning when the decision, I think the right decision, was made. We've all personally put in thousands of man hours of energy and time into the event since last June, and every single day I put work into the event, and so have the team. We've worked so hard in it because we believe in it, and it's all for the greater good, There's no one paying us. We're not doing it for any other reason other than to look to lift the spirits, the hearts and spirits of everyone, and bring people together, and do something for the greater good. So when it came to the weather, we were keeping an eye on the weather. And, we were waiting till the last minute to see, praying and hoping that the weather would turn in our favour to make it, if it was at all possible, that we could run the event and have the event. Obviously, it was the absolute last resort to postpone the event. But the final straw really was when it went to the red alert and all public transport was cancelled. I think it was Wednesday evening. In hindsight, we probably should have cancelled it Wednesday evening. But then we woke up on Thursday morning and it wasn't a pleasant experience. There was a lot of tears, and myself, I was crying for the first time in years, It was that bad. It was but I knew we had to do this. This was something that we had to do sooner rather than later.
But you called it at the right time, because it was when the red alert was issued, And that was the right time to say, no, okay, that's it. It's gone beyond the joke. I mean, this weather we've never experienced before in Ireland.
Sure.
Well, I mean, they say 1982, but we've said at the beginning of the show, this is actually worse than 1982 because we remember, we're a couple of old farts, so we remember.
Sure.
And it was definitely worse than 1982.
Sure.
And it's just.
Can I just say something? I mean, I think Mark Devlin mentioned to me on the phone there yesterday that, mate, he says you could have picked any other weekend out of the other 52 weeks of the year. And I said back to him, I said, Mark, I could have picked any weekend out of the last, since 1982. And it's kind of worse than that. But ultimately, I mean, if anyone was traveling down to the event and, if an accident happened or they got hurted or worse, then myself or the organisers, we wouldn't want that on our conscience and to take responsibility for that. And even if we had to cut our losses and pick up the pieces later, you can't put a price on someone's life and health and safety. And that was ultimately, in the Thursday morning, what, made us make the decision, because people's health and safety have to be number one priority. And you know what, it might seem at the time a big deal, but in hindsight, I mean, it's, everyone's safe, no one died, everyone's we're here to live and fight another day. And, I'm looking at more, I suppose, in the bigger picture, thinking, the universe, throws something at you like this, and everything's for a reason, and is there any such thing as a coincidence kind of thing? And kind of to look at it, well, it just wasn't meant to be this time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not until after a period of time that you look back at a situation and you realise that the kind of synchronicity that maybe happened at the time comes into focus. And then you look at it and go, okay, now I can see why it was a bad idea for that weekend not to, that it was a bad idea having it on that weekend, not because of the weather, but because of X, Y, and Z. And sometimes we don't see that until after a period of time, or something happens that we realise that, okay, maybe it was a good thing it didn't take place. Now, let's talk about, now, there's certain things you can't talk about and certain things you can't talk about. There will be people wondering about the rescheduling of it, because it's not cancelled, it's just postponed, it's rescheduled, and obviously what's going to happen to the ticket holders and all that kind of stuff. Can you give us what you know at the moment?
Sure. Well, I get to meet the rest of the team. I know there's some great people there behind me, such as John Payne, who was due to MC and compare the event and did the meditation at the event. Jerry Hone and so many others, Sinead Howard, there's some other great people there behind me. And if, I haven't had the opportunity because I've been snowbound. In fact, I could only leave the house today for the first time since Tuesday, but to answer your question, I mean, we have a meeting tomorrow with Dooley's Hotel Management to see where we go from here, and to look at trying to pick up the pieces and plan a way forward, hopefully if there is one, and go from there and meet the rest of the team and decide on, obviously different things that we need to decide on to make sure that we make the most ethical, moral and do the right thing for everyone that purchased a ticket and everyone that was part of the kind of whole event. But I will say that, just to have patience, because, as I mentioned, I mean, we have put a lot into this, and in terms of the funds, they were all basically used up. We were all ready to go. I mean, this conference, remember, it's only a couple of normal people, amateurs trying to do things as professionally as they can, Yeah. And, we've been
doing that for the last 8 years and getting away with it so far.
Yeah. But if people can, I can just ask everyone, we're all connected, and this isn't my event, it's not your event, it's everyone's event, and that was the whole idea. The people can kind of support it and show some solidarity in this time with what we're trying to do, And obviously when we meet tomorrow, there's nothing the reason we're doing this event is for the greater good, and it's heart based, and we're going to basically decide on what is the best solution, hopefully, for all, and everyone would be happy, and that we can continue and have the rescheduled event when the time is right. But keep in mind as well that the rescheduled event will very much depend upon Dooley's Hotel, in that they need, obviously, their big conference room free for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, over a weekend. And, we're coming in now to wedding season, and their function room is very busy. I mean, it's booked out a lot. I mean, we had to book that conference room last summer, literally 9 months before the conference. So, when the actual rescheduled event will be, we don't know at the moment. We'll all know more tomorrow after the meeting with Dooley's management, and the team, myself and the team meet Dooley's management tomorrow, and we intend then on putting out an official statement about where we go from here tomorrow afternoon. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, you have to speak to Dooley's. As you say, you had it booked from last year, and it's because it's over 3 days, it's very hard for a hotel to be able to turn around and go, oh yeah, we have 3 days free, because, a lot of the time they don't. And even if they do, sometimes they don't tell you because they don't want to be saying that they're not busy, for obvious reasons, because of the economy. So you have to kind of play ball with them and see what they have. So look, even if it was a case that you had 3 days available in June or July, I mean, I think that would be fine for most people. It's not a case of it has to be within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think, I think that would give you time to kind of regroup and get things organised and get to promotion. Plus the fact that your team will be out of pocket a certain amount of money because of all the advertising that you've done for this weekend. Which can't be, obviously, you have flyers and you have posters and all that done, and adverts in magazines advertising this weekend. You can't reuse them for someone in June or July because it'll have this weekend's date on it. So people have to remember that your team, who are volunteers, nobody's getting paid, have invested all this money into promoting this, just to help wake people up and to educate people about what's going on. And people have to keep that in mind. The same with what myself and Steve do here. We've been doing this for 8 years. We're not getting paid. We do it because, like you and your team, you have a moral conscience to wake people up, to help people, to educate people. And that's the whole idea. And sometimes, maybe like you, we get the odd email in going, oh, that wasn't very professional. And me and Steve going, well, that's okay, because we're not bloody professional. We're only two dads, talking to the world through a medium of radio. And so, we're not trained DJs, and we don't claim to be. We never have. Like yourself, we're all people trying to make an effort to try and change society for the better and wake people up, and that's what you're doing. So
exactly, and we would hope and pray that people can show empathy for a situation the weekend. I mean, it's just like it has been. I'm not going to lie to anyone. I mean, it's been a really, really stressful couple of days. I've basically been trying to manage it the best I could, and my family here have been with great support, and it's always, everything is always better after a good night's sleep and stuff like that. So I'm feeling a bit more positive today, and I really hope that people now can get behind the rescheduled event and make it an even better and more wonderful experience for everyone. And when it's meant to happen, and because I mean, everything's easy in hindsight, and a couple of people have said to me, oh well, you should have insured the event, for example. In terms of a freak weather situation, I mean, that's okay saying that, but no one predicted it, and certainly I didn't. I mean, and you're always hoping that the mainstream got it wrong, and you're waiting till the last minute. I mean, a lot of people as well said, you should have done it probably the day before. And that's probably true, because a lot of people had actually started to make their journey to Ireland. And there's two poor ladies. I mean, one lady, Margaret, I met at the AV event in Crane's one in England last year. And she had made her way to Dublin, and she's a dear friend of mine, you know, and she's in her 60s, and she's waiting for taxis for 6 hours, and then she's ringing me thinking the event is on, and, you know, I just felt so bad, you know, I just felt terrible, because I can't leave the house, I'm blocked in myself. And then there was another lady over, she was a yoga teacher from the Isle of Wight, Ray, who also was in a similar situation. And actually, there was there was actually 8 people in Dooley's Hotel from Wednesday waiting for the conference, and I actually went in today to meet them, and, you know, apologise and just on a personal level. And, you know, lovely people, and they're still there, and they can't obviously go on to tomorrow back in their flight. So, I think they were understanding and understood, but ultimately, I mean, the thing with the event as well is that with the reschedule, like, it's not a local event. Like, this is really international. Like, when I was looking through at the weekend, a lot of people are actually coming in from other countries to this event, and only about 10% of the ticket holders were local, you know, from the southeast. Yeah. Most of the ticket holders are from all over Ireland and beyond, you know. People come from Germany and France and, like, you know, the UK, which is great, you know, but I was just frustrated that, you know, people had already started to make their journey before the event was cancelled. But, you know, and obviously it's a wasted weekend for them, but, you know, what can you do, you know? Well,
it's a holiday in Ireland.
Exactly.
They'll benefit from it. We have a couple of comments in there, Trevor, so over to Steve.
Yeah, Trevor, a couple of comments have come in, and I suspect that these comments are hopefully representing the common, obviously the comments from everyone who obviously didn't get to either take part or go and see the conference this weekend. But Chris says, please let Trevor know we completely understand the decision to postpone. I have massive respect for Trevor, John and all the Open Minds Conference folks. They are doing what we all should do, get up off our bums and make a difference. Chris also says, John F. Kennedy said one man can make a difference and every man/woman should try. The Open Mind folks are doing just that. Joan says, Chris, I feel complete pain and stand by him totally. We will support whenever it can be rearranged for. So hopefully they're just a couple of comments that represent the general population.
That's great. I mean, like, I have received a lot of emails and people, you know, obviously with tickets and they're concerned, and, you know, with the financial side, and you know, I can't really say because, I mean, I'm meeting the team tomorrow, but, you know, like, all I can say is, like, everyone, like, will be looked after. I mean, we're going to make the right choice from our hearts. We feel is, you know, the most ethical and moral thing to do. And, because, you know what, I mean, we all want the same thing, like, we're all connected, but just to maybe have a bit of patience with it, because, you know what, like, as I said, all the funds were used up because, like, I mean, the conference was ready to go, you know?
Yeah.
And, the way it works is Eventbrite, they pay out 1/3 of the funds 2 weeks after the conference. So, you know what, like, unless, I mean, you know, the funds at the moment aren't there, but not saying there won't be, but at this moment, just to give us some space to regroup and pick up the pieces, and, you know, in time, hopefully everyone can be looked after.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not fair enough, because I can't really say more than that. It's just...
Yeah, I know, you have to meet them tomorrow, so you can't really say anything. Yeah, but look, exactly. we did kind of have a chat, and we said, maybe what we can do, because you're going to be, somewhere along the line, either you or your group is going to be out of pocket, right? Either way, just somewhere down the line, you're going to be out of pocket. So we might, I think what we could do is probably have a donation or a fundraiser to cover the extra cost that you're out of pocket. Now, we won't know anything for probably about a week or so, maybe. But when you contact me and Stephen and let us know what the state of play is, then what we might do is have a fundraiser or have an auction. And we have talked about this, and we have 1 or 2 ideas for auctions. And
auction off your old LPs and 45 collection.
Well, no, I'll give you the auction, one of the auction ideas. Now, this has nothing got to do with being egotistical. If anything, I feel sorry for the person who wins it, right? But one of the auction items will be dinner with me and you. There you go. There you go.
Oh my God! What, McDonald's drive-through?
Yeah. No,
that lasted a big spenders.
No, it'd be better than that, but we have to get in for the early bird. It's only 21. But look, so we can have a laugh with it, right? We can have a laugh, and I know there's probably a few others, and maybe the people who are speaking at the conference can all join in, and we can have a bit of fun with it, and we can auction off a few things, and raise a few funds, depending on, obviously, we'll see how it goes tomorrow, and let us know when that, and then we'll let our listeners know, because we like being transparent with things like this, and let our listeners know and say, look, here's the state of play, here's what's going on, this is what your out of pocket, and we'd like to have either a fundraiser or donations, an auction, and maybe we can have a bit of fun with it as well, and raise a few funds for things. And obviously, if we do something like that, then we feel sorry for the person who wins that one, because you'll have two of us in your ear, for the whole meal. But so that's just an idea. Can I just
say thanks very much for that? And I'd like to say thanks on behalf of the Open Minds team to all of the positive messages of support and encouragement. And, it's made us all stronger. I even see, look, the speakers, there's some great, support and friendships we made, and people looking out for each other in this time. And, I just want to say, I love everyone, and, thanks for everyone. And please, keep the faith and keep the hope alive. And hopefully the sleepless nights and all the crying and all this, whatever the universe is throwing at us at this time, will be all worth it in the end, because, at the moment, the way I feel at times is burnout, like I put everything into this. It's like you put absolutely my heart, soul, and soul of the team. So we just have to basically live to fight. Hopefully we live to fight another day.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Okay, Trevor, well listen, we're going to leave it there because we have to go off to a musical break and then finish up the show. Thanks for coming on. Is there any thing you want to add, finish up with, anything you want to make a comment on?
No, I'd just like again, from my heart to just, send love out to everyone. I love you all, and look, thanks for your understanding and your support and your love, and hopefully, we'll meet one day and we'll get this going, and to be the great event that I know I still believe in, and that is going to be, and that we can all come together and, lift our hearts and spirits. And, we really need this and at this time. And so thanks, lads. Thanks for having me on, and so we'll catch you soon.
No problem. Cheers, Trevor. Thanks for coming on. Just stay with us there for a minute, and we're just going to go off to a musical break. We'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com and peoplesinternetradio.com.
Okay, we're back. Show a little respect, Erasure. That song is especially for Chris on the chat room there. I think that's one of his favourite songs as an old Northsider. I think he used to dance to that in, name some place, I don't know, the apartments or somewhere. Yeah.
Or Tamangos, where they go. Tamangos.
They wouldn't let Chris into Tamangos, not with that big shoe.
Now, Chris said he'll donate 50 quid to smash Alan's CD collection, okay. Yeah, my 80s collection. Yeah, there's probably a few things that we could do from an auction point of view. Can you imagine the poor person having us on both sides, all that information coming out,
Yeah, it could be hard to digest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, it's just a novel idea. We just said we'd throw it in there for a bit of fun. But if it's the case that the funding, the short money and the out of pocket, we just said, look, if we did some kind of donation thing, auction thing, that would be a good idea to raise, just to cover the debts, really. That would be fantastic. And then in turn, people might benefit from something with the auctions or with the donations. I think the auction thing is good because people will get something out of it. Donations are great and it's much appreciated. But if you, in auction things also, the plus point where you can actually get something out of it. So we'll leave that with Trevor and then we'll come back and see what we can do with that and see what happens. Now, next week, yes, we have Thomas on the show next week, but there's a reason why we're having Thomas back on the show next week. He's also going to have with him Kim from the Foundation. And this is a first, because as far as I know, the only radio station Kim has been on is with Thomas. And if you were keeping listening to Thomas's show and what's been going on, you'll realise that Kim is highly a highly sought after woman. Reason being because she has the keys to the kingdom, and the cabal have been basically trying to kill her, take her out and take her down because she has the keys to the kingdom, the codes for the collateral accounts and the financial system. And there's a lot of things going on in the background. So Kim is going to be on, fingers crossed, next week with Thomas, and we want to talk to Kim specifically about Ireland and what's going on with the Irish governments and what the Foundation are doing regarding the governments in general, the UK as well. And do they know what's going on, Irish government and the UK government, and what's happening? Now, we know that America has to be done first, and apparently that's been done with the declaration, and now they are sovereign, and Trump has accepted that, and they've acknowledged it. And 120 odd other countries want to be sovereign also. How that fits in with Ireland and what's going on over here, I don't know. But if this momentum is happening, if this sovereignty rollout is happening across other countries, and this is the snowball coming down the hill, then I think the Irish government should be really concerned, and especially the people who are involved in the government for sinister reasons or do not want anything of the sort to be happening where the people are going to benefit. I'd be kind of worried if I was in their shoes at the moment, because all this is going on at the moment, and which is quite interesting. So we'll see. We'll speak to Kim, we'll speak to Thomas, and have a kind of Irish UK information as to what's going on there. Now, the other thing, now don't shoot the messenger when I say this, okay? I'm only pointing it out, alright? And I'm not saying dates or anything. Well, it is a date, but look, I put the information up on Facebook, and I said to people, look, make up your own mind, use discernment. If it resonates with you, go ahead. If it doesn't, it doesn't, what have you. But for people who aren't on Facebook and listen to the show, some of you have probably heard about the 18th and 19th of March. And there's a lot of these quantum healers who are doing hypnosis and regression hypnotherapy, like the Alba Wymans and like the, I think it's Alison Keogh and the Dolores Cannons, who are talking about the New Earth and everything else. And they're saying there's an event apparently supposed to happen on the 18th and 19th of March, and it's going to be coming from the centre of the galaxy, apparently, and it's going to have an effect from an electrical point of view. Now, it could be like a CME or something, but it's supposed to be energy hitting the planet, and it's going to be apparently affecting a lot of people on the planet in a positive way. Now, is it going to happen? How many times have we been down this road, Steve?
Oh, more times than we care to remember.
More times, loads and loads of times. Is it going to happen? I haven't a clue. Chances are it probably won't, and it could be all, it could be all people just, somebody saying it and other people just spreading the word and just repeating it. The whole repeater system is in action on the internet. But there has been a lot of these quantum healers talking about it, and regression hypnotherapists and other people coming in with dreams or channeling and all this, all saying the same thing, coming at within the first quarter of that was given out the first quarter of March, right? There wasn't, some people are saying the 18th, 19th, but the first quarter of March. I know Jared Rand mentioned the energy. He said it's more going to be at the end of the year rather than at the start of the year. So look, we don't know. But look, we're going to put it out there. We're going to let people know. You have to go off and do your own research and check it out yourself. If you want to have a kind of heads up, have a listen to a lady on the internet who's a quantum hypnotist called Alison Keogh. That's COE. And on her YouTube channel, she talks about what her patients are reporting when she regresses them and what they're saying. It's interesting information. Is it going to happen? I don't know. She said that the predictions are about 75% plus. That her clients are 75% plus of her clients are all saying the same thing, which is pretty good odds, I suppose. But then again, you just don't know. How many times have you been down this road? So again, just keep an open mind. But check her out, see what you think. Dolores Cannon, I know she's passed away, but she also has talked about the New Earth. She didn't give any times or dates, but she does talk about it. And more people are talking about it. There's another lady who said her son is actually channeling to her and talking to her We've emailed her and asked her to contact us to try and get it on the show to talk about the information. Her son's on the New Earth and he's feeding information to her and she's reporting on it. So, it's all happening, also, if people are seeing the same time, 11-11, 17-17, 21-21, myself and Steve are now fed up seeing it all the time, aren't we? We're seeing it all the time.
We were on Skype there a couple of nights back, just having a chat, and Alan said to me, right, look, time's getting on, I'll let you go, and I said, okay, sure, look, it's 2020, and he goes,
there you go.
It just keeps happening.
It's got to do with the looping. We're actually realising that we're in a loop, and the fact we're seeing this, we're recognising that we're in a loop, and maybe it's our higher self telling us. So it's all happening, folks. We have to be aware, keep track of things, and watch. Be mindful, I suppose, is a real Jedi thing. Be mindful. And just watch what's going on. The little things, keep an eye on them. For myself, anyway, Alan James, take it easy. Have a safe week. And watch that snow. It's still out there. Drive safe. And take it easy. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Yes, I'll be driving safe hopefully on the way home. Kim, do we have a full name for Kim? Shane wants... No, we don't.
No.
Sorry about that, Shane. You're just going to have to wait till next week. Okay, from myself, Stephen George, it's been a very interesting show, I have to say. Lots of great information. And we do it all again next week, weather permitting. Well, I'm sure it'll be all gone by then, but you never know. We could be in a mini ice age by next week. Let's hope not. Anyway, thanks to everyone who was on the chat rooms there for all your comments and questions. And I hope you all have a great week, and hopefully no one is affected too badly by the weather. Okay, from the rest of us here, take care. Bye-bye.